Thanks for tuning into the Zelos podcast. I'm your host, Rocky Snyder, and this week I'm keeping in the neighborhood. I'm going over the hill to the Bay FC. That's right, the National Women's Soccer League has a new team, and it's Bay FC. Their sports scientist, Gaby Smith, is my guest this week, and we're going to be talking all about sports science. And, they played the Houston Dash this weekend and won. So now they're in the playoffs. But before we get underway and jumping right into our conversation, I want to remind you can go to my website, rockysnyder.com, for getting information about continuing education workshops. Whether it's online or in person, I am approved to teach classes to athletic trainers, physical therapists, chiropractors, strength coaches, personal trainers, and more. So those CEUs are available if you happen to be in the field of medical and training, in sports teams, or in the general population. Just check us out. Check our calendar of events coming up, rockysnyder.com. Also, check out Setanta College. That is the place to go if you want a master's degree of science in performance coaching. Or you might want to check out sports injury and return to performance management. They also have two tracks. One is applied sports biomechanics and movement science, and applied sport and exercise psychology. Go to setantacollege.com, enter RS10 for 10% off tuition today. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Rocky_Snyder. Tell two friends about Zelos. Hit that subscribe button, and here we go with the conversation. I just came back from an NSCA event down in Southern California over the weekend. We had a good turnout. But there were just a few sports scientists, but I have a feeling you guys kind of just congregate amongst each other. Am I right?
Honestly, not really. I feel like kind of like within leagues, I think so. Like I know a lot of the sports scientists within kind of the NWSL. But I still think like there's so much room to kind of grow and connect as more of a community. I think like the NSCA has like groups on like Facebook and like LinkedIn and everything like that, but
Yeah,
it's
right.
still kind of when you go to these conferences and you find another sports scientist, it's like, oh wow, like there is someone else kind of out there doing the same thing. And I think even with the title sports science, like there's so many different ways you can go within it, and just hearing about kind of what other people are doing in the
Yeah.
field, it's like I didn't even know that was a thing. Like we were at I was up at a conference over the summer and just kind of talking to someone even with the Mariners, so different sport, but some of the things that they're looking at, I'm like, I never would have even thought that's a thing that you have to think about kind of in your world. That's just not relevant in mine. But still you can take that and be like, okay, if you're looking at arm angles and all of those things as pitchers might be fatiguing, like how can I take that back to my world and what can I look at in a different way? So I don't like I don't think we're kind of this secret group that's all like talking to each other. I do think it's still kind of spread out. And I think just the more that we can connect now that sports science is becoming so much of kind of a bigger field and kind of exploding the way that it has been over the recent years, there's just so much room to kind of learn from each other as we do connect and learn more.
Yeah, before we get into your superhero origin story about how you came to be with the Bay FC and all that, I'm curious about what you just mentioned. Is like sports science encompasses everything. It is so its broadband is so wide that I could easily see a narrowing or a project to define the parameters within which sports science resides. But before that occurs, like what what are the elements for you that make up sports science as it pertains to the Women's National Soccer League and Bay FC?
Yeah, I think kind of like you said, like there are so many different things that it's hard to kind of pick just one aspect. I think, um, and the way that we're organized too is such a multidisciplinary like group that we've got our strength coach, we've got mental performance, we've got obviously the medical side and kind of all working together. So I think my role currently as sports science is kind of bringing in all of the information that we are taking, whether that's GPS data, force plate data, heart rate, some of like the medical data that we're collecting, and just being able to kind of put that together to get more of a holistic view of kind of where our athletes at. Um, is kind of what my job as like a sports scientist is right now. I think there's so many different ways you can go, and a lot of people just think like straight technology means sports science. And I think there's so much kind of more to having a sports science kind of background and being able to help um, get your athletes to kind of wherever they're trying to go than just like, oh, I don't have technology. It doesn't mean I'm a sports scientist, or I can't like be a sports scientist unless I have force plates, GPS, kind of all this other stuff. It's like, no, you can kind of start where you're at and kind of take the basics of science, whether that's anatomy, whether that's kind of even just like the process of like the scientific method going back to elementary school, or even if it's as simple as like wellness questionnaires, like something that costs zero money, and just kind of taking whatever pieces you can and trying to put those together, I think is kind of like the science behind sports science, if I had to define.
Certainly. So what got you on this path? Obviously, you appear to me visually here to be having an athletic background of sorts, and and somewhere along the way, you delved into the NSCA and strength conditioning and sports science, but your whole educational track has been toward kinesiology, movement, and so on. What inspired that, and how did that all come about?
So you're right. I played soccer growing up. I was never really like the strongest, so kind of got introduced to lifting that way. When coaches were like, if you want to play in college, if you want to play at the next level, like you've got to get stronger. So it was kind of forced upon me initially. And kind of as it started working, as I was feeling better, as I was playing better, I was like, hey, there's something to this. And my kind of go-to was like, okay, but why? Like it wasn't good enough to just be like, okay, this is working. So I kind of wanted to know the why behind it. And kind of started learning more about it that way. I don't know if you remember, but I think it was called Sports Science with John Brinkus was like on at the same time. That was kind of like one of the first things that kind of got me onto like the possibility of it. I think we watched pretty much every episode. My dad was like, "Oh, the show again." Um, but so that was one of the things. And
It was
then
good. They had some really nice cheesy graphics, you
exactly, yeah,
know?
yeah,
Yeah, it was
so I
great.
thought
It was
that
at the time, it was ahead of its class, I think.
exactly. Glad someone knows because some people are whenever I bring it up, they're like, "Oh yeah, sure, that shit," and
I
pretend
think
to
it still floats around the Discovery Channel from time
yeah,
to time. I don't know.
exactly. So kind of at the same time, obviously playing soccer, like the women's national team is like the class of the world at the time. And their performance coach started putting some stuff out, and so I learned her name and learned a little bit about her, and that was Dawn Scott. So kind of knowing like idling the women's national team, knowing probably I was not going to get there someday, but like knowing that there is some sort of science to help players kind of maintain being at that level and ultimately getting to that level. That was something that was really interesting to me, along with seeing like, hey, this is working for me. So kind of all at that time, getting ready to go to college, playing in college, it was kind of time to decide what I was going to do. And I was always like, that's something that's really interesting to me. But I committed to more of a business school to play. And I was like, both my parents are in business. I'm going to business school. Like, I'll figure something out. um, so kind of got through my first year and was like, this isn't it. I can't do the rest of my life sitting at a desk doing something that I don't want to do. Um, Honestly, at the time, like it wasn't really something that I thought I could make a career out of. And I was like, I don't know where this is gonna end up. Um, but kind of just went with it and ended up becoming a biology major. Um, I thought that I wanted to get more into the research side of things, like the Nike Sports Research Lab was something that I was really interested in as well, and kind of the biomechanics side. So I was like, okay, if I'm going to go to grad school, I'll just be a bio major. I know I'm going to have to kind of get another degree somewhere. Um, so kind of took the leap of faith that there was something that I was going to fall into, not really knowing what it was. It wasn't something that was familiar to me or to my family, just knowing like business is what everyone knew.
Hmm.
So then obviously after Bryant, went up to get my master's in exercise science at Northeastern. Um, Started to get more exposure in the lab, but really missed the team environment. Like that's what I grew up knowing. Like there's just something about being part of a team, working with teams, working with athletes that like you can't find other places. And that was something that was really special to me and something that I really missed. So being in the lab, I was like, this is cool, but like, I don't know if this is it either. Um, so my second year of my master's, I was an intern up at Harvard, with their strength and conditioning program. And that's kind of where I first got introduced to more of like the strength and conditioning side of things, really just getting kind of thrown in, working with teams. But up until that point, it was kind of like, okay, I think I want this. Oh, no, this isn't necessarily it, but these are the things that I can take from what isn't it to try to kind of narrow down to what I want to ultimately do.
Very
Um,
cool.
yeah, still wasn't really the sports science side of things, but kind of as at the time and even still today in a lot of settings, like you got to be a strength coach and a sports scientist, like more in, especially in the NWSL, like at the professional level, it's kind of getting split off, but definitely at the time it was like you got to be able to do it all. And that's kind of where the first kind of exposure to the sports science world kind of came in.
Very good. And obviously you're looking for opportunities. It resonates within your story here, the internship with Harvard. So then you started going towards sports teams, looking outward from school, trying to get placed with a team or organization. Where did you start going from there?
So, as I was finishing up my master's, it was spring of 2020. So
Oh,
COVID,
good timing.
yeah, it was perfect timing. Um, COVID kind of shut everything down up in Boston, kind of obviously everywhere. But I had another job kind of lined up for after I finished, and I was like, it was down in North Carolina. I was like, well, I could spend March in Boston, which, as you know, not exactly a fun time. Not the best weather, but so decided to move down to North Carolina a little bit early. I was going to have a couple weeks kind of just to figure out where I was and get settled. And literally on the plane, got the email being like, yep, we're shutting down until further notice. Like we don't know kind of when we'll open up again. Um, and honestly, I think that was probably one of the best things that happened to me. Because then I kind of one got a chance to breathe after being in school for 18 straight years. But also I kind of got an opportunity to look around and see what was there that was going to be really interesting and a really good fit for me. So luckily enough, Mike Young's facility down in North Carolina Athletic Lab was right there.
Yeah.
And he worked with the Courage, still works with the Courage, and they had an internship program. So I got to learn with him and work with the Courage, and kind of that's where I first was introduced to the NWSL, GPS technology, all the stuff he's got going on, and like one of the best experiences, like learned so much. Like honestly, so lucky that kind of everything else fell apart for that to be able to come together.
Yeah, I had Mike on the show. Well, it's been a little while, but we talked all about North Carolina Courage and well, Dr. Young, I should say. He's got his
Yeah.
PhD, of course. Boy, if there's somebody to learn under, Mike's a great mentor for that. So you hung out there, you did that, and then how did you make your way to San Jose or to the Bay Area with the FC?
Oh yeah, there's a couple stops in between. So following season, I was an intern with the Red Stars up in Chicago, and Megan Young was another mentor of mine. She was with the Red Stars at the time, with the Sounders now. So kind of got to learn with her and really kind of took the GPS stuff and ran with it there.
Such a
So
small world.
yep, exactly.
Yeah, Coach Meg, she was Coach of the Year last year for with the NSCA. Another just juggernaut of a professional out there. So you're just falling into the right holes, aren't you?
Exactly. Things
Wow.
came together really nicely for me. So learned a ton from her as a professional, great person. And then kind of got to see a full more regular season in the NWSL after COVID wasn't exactly a regular year down there. Um so was with the Red Stars, and then still kind of an internship role. And then was at the University of Kentucky as full-time with their women's soccer program, kind of strength coach, sports scientist, doing it all. Um, Knowing that at the college level, you have to work with multiple teams, and ultimately wanting to get back to kind of the pro soccer side of things, because that's just the environment that I liked and felt most like. I wanted to work with athletes at the highest level. Now, athletes at Kentucky, definitely athletes at the highest level as well. But that pro soccer environment was really where I wanted to get to. So I was at Kentucky for only a year before a call back into the league came. Um, and it was with Kansas City. So was with the current last year as kind of their sports scientist. As things changed, really learned a ton there as well. And then this year, opportunity at Bay called. And I think it's really a rare opportunity where you get to kind of be part of something in their first year.
Yeah.
It's not like we kind of get to build from the start. There is no like, well, this is how we've done it before, so this is how we're going to do it now. Like, we can kind of figure things out and build things the way that they should be, and the way that we are supported by staff, by ownership. Everything is just trying to create the best environment and ultimately be a world-class organization, which is something that I couldn't say no to. So
Honestly, it's such a great opportunity to start something from scratch with the knowledge base that's existing in current time, and you're not going to be hamstringed by old ways, traditional kind of lore that somebody says, "Well, this has worked in the past. This is how it's going to be done for now." You just get a clean slate. So, with that, I'm excited for you, Gabby. So, especially when it comes to just having that opportunity to go, okay, where do we how do we put this recipe together? So for your perspective, I'm very curious to what are the big buckets when it comes to sports science for you and professional women's soccer? What are the things, what are the metrics that you want to glean from the athletes, from play, practice, and so on?
yeah. So I think kind of one of the things that we kind of had to set the foundation on early on was like coming into an environment where we literally had nothing, was like, what are our big rocks? Like, we cannot do it all year one. If we do, we are going to be drowning. And if you try to do everything, you're going to do nothing.
Yeah.
So I think we really kind of had to narrow in on that. And people have asked me, like, if you had to have one technology, what would be the first thing that you do? And my answer is always wellness. Like, if you can't have that basic understanding of where players are at, or are saying that they're at, whether they actually are sore and tired, but if they're saying they're sore and tired, then that's how they feel, and you have to kind of work with them in some way. So I think one of the things is always kind of having some sort of wellness questionnaire. It's just a touch point. Whether you do anything or act on it is another kind of category, but I think you need to have that. One is a touch point with your athletes to just start to create that relationship and start the conversation of like, hey, how are you doing today? And it's an easy way to be like, hey, I saw this on your wellness. So that way they're like, oh, I'm not just filling this out just to fill it out. Like, they actually are looking at it, and then that relationship kind of starts. Because if that relationship isn't there, like, I can ask you to run 100 sprints, but if you don't trust me or respect me, like, we can't really go anywhere from there.
So well said. So well said. And in terms of, well, in terms of cost, like you said earlier, a questionnaire is pretty much cost free, but it gives you so much information depending upon if you're asking the right questions.
For sure.
So, what's on your wellness questionnaire, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, so we keep it fairly simple. We'll go sleep quality, sleep duration. And so quality, they're all 0 out of 10 kind of scales. Um, we'll go mood. So how excited are you about training today, I believe is the exact way it's worded. Stress, what is your stress level today? And then are you experiencing any lower body soreness, and rate your fatigue. 0 to 10 are a big kind of 5 that we look at.
And this is on some type of like software, whether it's Google Sheets or something else.
Yeah,
Uh,
we use Kitman as ours, so it's just an app that they have on their phone. The league uses Kitman for their medical services, so that's what we've gone with.
and so there's what, half a dozen questions then? 6, 7?
Yep.
And then they do this every day. They come to the stadium, come to the pitch. And so then you get the responses pretty much in real time before the day really begins. You do a review.
Yep. So we'll look at them real time as they come in, see if there's anything that needs to be flagged, either with medical. They can also like leave comments, or if they want to, like there's a little body map, and you can say like my hamstrings are sore, and like click on that side of whichever's sore. So we'll review it kind of as a medical performance group, and then obviously if there's anything that flags, just kind of have touch points with players as they come in to kind of go over those.
And then the software also shows trends over the course of many days, weeks, months, where you're saying, okay, well, this person has actually been feeling more stress as the season progresses. Let's see what's going on there.
Yeah, so I'll export everything, and then I've got a whole Power BI dashboard thing that has all of kind of the trends for the entire season, break it down by week, month, kind of everything like that too.
So, what would next be for your list, whether it's a wish list or you have it in place after a wellness questionnaire? What's next? What do you want to know about?
Um, Uh, from my standpoint, probably GPS, and kind of just like, what are we doing? Not necessarily just like, you can then use that to say, yes, we can do more, yes, we can do less, but like, what are we doing right now, and how are players responding to that, I think is kind of the next question mark and box that has to get checked. I think a lot of work behind the scenes will go in with the coaches, just in terms of planning out what sessions of the week are going to look like, what days are we doing certain things, because there is obviously a way that the week should be laid out to help players kind of prepare for the weekend when we play, and then obviously kind of recovering from the harder sessions that we have throughout the week.
And currently, you only have matches on the weekend. You don't have a midweek match.
This year, yeah, it was one game per week. Last year we had a couple 3-game weeks where there was a midweek game thrown right in there.
That's much easier in regards to programming, isn't it?
Yeah, for
Yeah, you
sure.
don't have to worry about 2 game day -1 in 1 week or plus ones or anything else. You can prepare a little bit more with a little bit more creative license, I'm sure. So, okay, so answer me this, Batman. How about if let's just take it's game day. They're playing on the weekend. What are you looking for leading up to the match, and what are you looking for on the next day?
Yep. So kind of leading up to the match throughout the training week, how I do it, I know there's kind of a handful of different ways that it can be done. I will take kind of like a top game output and use that kind of as their reference. And then throughout the training week, look to get a certain percentage of that throughout the week. So whether it's, this is what they usually get in a game for total distance, okay, for the week, I want to be at 150% of that for our 4 kind of training days. And same thing for like high speed running, sprinting. I like that personally, because then you can talk with coaches and be like, everything is in reference to the game, because that's the most stressful thing you're going to have to do. So let's make it in reference to that, rather than being like, everyone's got to get 100 and whatever meters of however much. Well, in a game, you might have 3 times as much sprint distance as someone else, so we can't all have the same kind of targets to hit throughout the week. So
I
that's
see.
kind of building up through the
So
week.
cumulatively over the course of say 4 days, you want to try to get about over 100% of what they're going to do in a match, just so that there's a little overload principle. They're feeding into that stress. They're going to have to recover, but then when the match comes around, it's going to be less than what they've been having through the week.
Exactly, and throughout the week, different days will have different targets. So our match day -3 is gonna be probably our hardest session of the week, so we might try to get 70% of our high speed running or sprinting in that day and kind of just pick and choose when we get it in throughout the rest of the week for certain things. But overall, like, overfilling that bucket for what you would do in a game. Yep.
And when it comes to sleep, are you just monitoring that through the questionnaire, or are they utilizing some type of wearable tech?
I think we'd like to get to the point where there is some sort of wearable. For right now, it's just kind of more subjective reporting.
Got it. So with your GPS, let's kind of geek out a little bit. What are the major metrics you're looking for GPS? Are you looking for uh, a peak performance, level of fatigue, distance, highest speed, average speed? What is it you look at?
Um, I think it kind of depends on the session and depends who you're talking to. I think high speed running and sprint distance are big ones. Just for kind of within this league, it's so athletic and so transitional. That if you're kind of not either getting that in the week leading up to the game, like you're probably going to struggle on the weekend, just the way that teams play. And then obviously max speed. Every week we look to hit above, I like to hit above 95%. I think a lot of people are good with like 90%, but I like 95% of your max speed, ideally twice throughout the week, just for hamstring, kind of getting that sprint exposure, are kind of two of the major buckets. And then obviously looking at kind of XLs, D cells, knowing that those are going to be a lot more fatiguing than kind of just constant straight line running. And how do we still get the exposure that we need to make sure that we're sharp through those change of direction movements, but not blowing the gas out kind of close to games. Um, and I think obviously you have to kind of look at global volume, but I think that's kind of lower on the list than the high speed running, the sprinting, all of the change of direction and the more kind of fatiguing things, but definitely making sure we're hitting those top end speeds at least once a week. Hopefully one happens in the game as well, but ideally kind of twice throughout the training week.
And so this is, although it's science, it's not an exact science. Obviously, you're tweaking things. Are there any surprises that have come across your desk that you, or things you weren't expecting? Let's just put it that way, going, huh, I thought we would see a dip here because of that, but in fact, we're seeing a spike. Anything like that that you can kind of share?
Um, I think I've been surprised that even kind of as we've gotten this late into the season, like players' outputs in games, like we're still getting new max game outputs of whether it's total distance, high speed running, like new max speeds, even this late into the year. And I think for that to be happening is just kind of speaks to the work that kind of we've done to prepare players, but also the work players have done on the side of recovery and doing everything that they need to make sure that we're still performing this late into the season and going to be hopefully going on a long playoff run and still being able to perform at the highest level that they are able to.
And with Bay FC being a young, obviously, this is your inauguration here, your inaugural season, compared to, say, oh, the Thorns or um, a whole bunch of other teams that have been playing now for several years. In terms of your resources, are they comparable to the more seasoned teams? Or are you just going, okay, but like you say, I don't want to do too many things at once. Let's start slow, let's start small and progress from there. Because I got to say, I'm really impressed with the Bay FC's record right now going into the postseason. So I'm just curious, like, how many bells and whistles do you have compared to other teams?
I think we are right compared with other teams. We're right there. Our ownership wants and like the whole vision of the club is to be the best in the world. Like we don't want to be the best in the league. We don't want to be the best. Like there are other teams in California. Like the goal is always to kind of keep pushing the level and like be amongst the best of the best. And they have shown that support to us, and we have been able to kind of show that to the players. So if there is a reason that we say that we need something, and we can kind of back that reason up, ownership has never been kind of stingy with anything. And I feel like resource wise, we are probably near the top of the league just in terms of kind of anything that players need access to. Like we should be able to kind of get there and get them able to access whatever it is they need. So really can't speak highly enough of kind of this club and their vision to be the best, but also being able to kind of support that and be able to show like, okay, this is what it takes to be the best. We're willing to do whatever it takes to get there.
So do you have any Christmas list right now? What's on your Christmas list for Bay FC as a sports scientist? Is there anything that, because the owners are going to be obviously listening to this podcast you and I are doing right now, but yeah. And so if you got that opportunity, what would you wish for? Is there anything out of the ordinary?
Um, I like there's nothing I would say that's on my wish list right now that's not really in the works. I think even here we've got some things that haven't had other places that I've been, so that's really cool to see that like we're already kind of pushing beyond honestly what other teams have. So kind of once the training facility is done in a few years, I think we'll be rolling and kind of in a really good spot.
So do you stay up at night reading instruction manuals? Like, it sounds like you've got a couple new toys in there going, okay, I got to really dial this in. Are there things that you're doing right now that you're kind of exploring that you haven't necessarily launched because you're just going, okay, I got to really dial this thing in. I got to understand what it is that I actually want to get out of this information before I just start testing them or measuring this or that.
I think that's one of the biggest things right now is like we could do all of these tests on players and like do all of these things, but then it comes down to really what are you looking at and what's valuable and what's going to kind of move the needle. So I think readiness testing is kind of one thing that like we've started to kind of introduce later on in the year. But once again, it's like, are you looking at jump height? Are you looking at RSI? Is it a jump? Kind of what are we looking at? Um, Kind of for those tests. And then, yeah, I think it, like you said, it's kind of, we're just right now, honestly, collecting as much data as not as we can, because we don't want to test players left, right, and all day long. But kind of, we have a regular testing schedule that we're following right now. And then hopefully once we have a full season, being able to kind of look at that more and see more of the trends looking back, and see if what we missed throughout the year and how we can kind of look into those for next year and intervene either, or kind of what tests could be used to see trends, if that makes sense. Like if
Yeah.
there's something that would be more indicative of how players are kind of doing or performing throughout the year.
Right now, I have this mental image of a whole bunch of cards laid face down on a table, and you flip over one card, and it's the coaching staff, like head coach, assistant coach. You flip over another card, and it's the strength and conditioning team. Another card's like the athletic training staff. The other one's the PT, and another one's maybe dietitian, and so on. There's all these stakeholders on these cards, and the other cards are flipped face down, and I want you to flip over each card as it pertains to each of those stakeholders and give me an idea of what it is they come to you wondering about. Can you get me insight and information about this element as it pertains to my coaching, my rehab, my strength goals with my players, my recovery, whatever it is? So do you see where I'm saying? Like, what would the coach come to you and go, Gabby, look, I want you to take all these numbers that you've been crunched together, all this information, and give me an idea of this. What does the coach really want?
No, I honestly love that image because I haven't heard that one before, but it makes complete sense to me. And I think it's so relevant because it lays out perfectly kind of how we all are connected within the club. So I think from the coaching side of things, it's just like laying out the week, what is training going to look like, what should we do on certain days, and how does kind of they obviously have, this is what we want to focus on the attack. When we defend, this is what we want to do. And these are kind of the drills that we want to do, but where they kind of fit in throughout the week, I think is a kind of like we talked about on like match day -3, we want to do a lot of sprinting. So probably not a good day to do a drill that's in a 10x10 grid. So kind of, and our coaches haven't really worked at this level before where that's something that's familiar to them. So I think that relationship and kind of working with them throughout the training week has been kind of a big, huge experience for kind of everyone involved. Um,
Yeah,
so
that's awesome. Okay. What about the, let's say, the rehab department of the athletic trainer and physical therapist? What do they come to you for?
Obviously return to play is kind of, unfortunately injuries happen all the time. So just whether that's kind of if someone's out for a week or for 6 weeks, kind of how does that load? How can we kind of periodize that properly and progress them? One from kind of just whether it's straight line running, obviously into they'll probably lead early on, but we still want to make sure that they're getting loaded enough so they don't get blown out of the water as they get reintroduced to team training. And then as they become part more and more integrated into training, okay, what do we have to do after to make sure that they are getting the conditioning they need? How can we make that relevant or similar to what the team is going to be getting throughout the session, in the parts that they can't be a part of? And then kind of obviously debriefing and kind of making sure that we're all on the same page from a load perspective. Also kind of helping design any sessions if that's something that kind of needs to happen too, is we're collaborating a lot just in terms of like what are they going to be doing on the field before they get back into either the team environment or working with the coaches more closely.
And you play around with load considerably with the strength coaches as well. Do you have a say in that, or they just kind of they set that up with their own periodized program or however they're putting it together?
No, we only have one strength coach on staff right now and myself, and we work closely all the time. Like we bounce back ideas back and forth off of each other, whether it's this is what we're doing in the gym, how does that relate to what we're doing on the field? And I'll vice versa. I'll be like, this is what we're doing on the field. This week is going to be more of a deload week. How is that going to be reflected in the gym, or vice versa? So we work really closely, honestly, hand in hand. Like I'm in the gym, he's on the field, like we're kind of side by side all the time. um Working, he'll run the warm up some days I'll run the warm up. So kind of it's more of a performance rather than kind of strength conditioning. I'm sports science, we're pretty close in terms of bouncing, we're constantly talking. So yeah.
Great. And then when it comes to the team's nutritionist slash dietitian, you work with that person.
Yeah.
And what do they come to you for if
uh
they were to say, "Hey, I need some insight on this"?
A lot of times they will come to me and just be like, hey, how does this person's output look like, whether it's on the field, in the gym, because they have whatever goal that they might have, and just making sure like, hey, they have been trending, like their jump height is trending up, or like their game outputs have been going up. So a lot of time it's really good news based off of kind of the work that they've been putting in with a dietitian. But I think she always comes to me looking for like, what are some objective measures that we can also use to kind of one, show that yes, we're making progress, but also reinforce to the player like, hey, look, the work that you're putting in is paying off, and like we see it. So we also work pretty closely together. And then we also have mental performance too. So sometimes if there is kind of something on wellness, like I'll touch base with her and be like, hey, have you talked with so and so? Like I saw um whatever, this is kind of a trend that we've seen, like might can you just touch base with them? um
Very cool. You mentioned in some ways buy-in with the players when we were talking about the wellness questionnaire and oh cool, you're actually looking at these and you're engaging with me. Can you give me a couple, one or two examples of like something that sticks in your memory as a solid positive way of making that connection of having that athlete really buy in to your role and how your role benefits them?
yeah, I think like pretty much every club in the league has players fill out wellness, and a lot of times it becomes one of those things. It's like, yep, I'll fill it out every day, and no one looks at it and like
Mm-hmm.
does anything about it. But I remember one session in Lyft earlier on in the year. I don't remember what it was exactly that was sore or hurt or someone, and they put like clicked it on their little body map or whatever and said that they were fatigued or sore. And I just came up to them in the Lyft and I was like, hey, how does this feel on, I don't know if it was their hamstring or whatever. I was like, I saw on your wellness that like you're feeling pretty beat up today. They were like, oh, you actually like look at it? And then we were kind of able to modify based off of that. And I think it was more, it wasn't a rookie. Someone had been in the league for a few years and they were like, I'm just used to filling it out just because I'm told that I have to fill it out and like no one really does anything. And honestly, early on in the year, people were like shocked that I would continue to look at it more than after just the first like week or two. But I think it's kind of such a conversation starter. And then now, honestly, players even leave comments that it's like, a few months ago, like there was a little bit of a bug going around. It was like not feeling great today. And then it was like, okay, I'll tell our medical team, they'll reach out to them. And then it's like, okay, how can we start this process even earlier before you even get to the facility? Whether that's, hey, don't come in today because you're not feeling well. Like, one, don't be around people, but also we want to make sure that like you're resting and recovering. And just being able, little things like that you're able to kind of pick up on, whether that's one, to have a conversation, two, how can we start moving things earlier on, or give the coaches a heads up like, hey, for whatever reason, so and so might not need to be modified for today's session. I know that might affect your numbers for our 5v5 or the teams, but just kind of looking to be on the solution side earlier rather than kind of just trying to react to things as they happen or on the field and just trying to make things up as we go.
So I have been loving this conversation, and I can't pass up the fact that we got to talk about uh, PayPal Stadium, or formerly known as Avaya. When that puppy was built, Gabby, that when would drive by it, for those that don't know, where the San Jose Earthquakes and the Bay FC play is directly across the street from Norman Mineta International Airport, San Jose's airports, the heart of Silicon Valley. You've got jets flying in and out of there. They're so loud at the airport. I thought for sure you're not going to be able to hear the announcer, but you go to a match and you don't even know the airport is there. The fans are so loud. And if you enjoy libations, the other thing about PayPal is that it has the longest bar. It goes from one side of the pitch across to the other. It is the width of the pitch at one end, so you can actually just stand and watch the game down there. So first of all, that's a really cool place to work, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, it's awesome.
Is your office there at PayPal Stadium, or are you off site?
Nope, we're offsite. We train over at San Jose State, so we're there most of the week. We just go to PayPal for games.
Nice. And when it comes to collaborating with the Earthquakes and their staff, is that something that's been going on?
Not a ton, no.
What
Um,
jerks? What the heck? You're not
exactly.
welcoming the new kids to the block? I
No.
gotta talk to those boys. I don't know what's going on. But would you, is, I guess, is that something that other teams, that are you aware that it's just stays exclusive, or is this just something that you're gonna have to warm up to, and seeing you guys are playing in the same stadium, maybe you'll cross paths?
I think ideally we'd warm up to each other a little bit more. I think in general, it kind of depends on the situation. Some of the teams in the league are like affiliated with their MLS team. Like I know in Houston, like the Dash and the Dynamo kind of share the same ownership group. Where in Kansas City, like you have Sporting and you have the Current, and they're kind of like, once again, in kind of a similar situation where, well, now the Current have their own stadium, but last year it was like we share the same stadium, but that's kind of it. So I think there is room to kind of become good partners and learn from each other and work with each other and like how can we make each other better. Right now we're not there, but I think it would be great to get to a point where kind of we do have that relationship together.
Okay, what's the best part of your job? I'm gonna give you like flash kind of questions at the end here. Would you say the best part is?
Um, love being around the game every day. I love being around kind of the players, working with the staff, and just kind of getting to talk about soccer all day, every day. And then like being able to combine like the science and the why of things, because numbers always make sense to me more than just like, oh, this is how I feel. But kind of having like that tangible something. Um, but the soccer part of things for sure.
And what's the worst or most challenging thing for you?
Oh boy, the worst or most challenging thing. I think the season can get long, so sometimes days can get long and be a grind. Like I said, we started preseason in January and here we are almost in November and kind of still going. Um so I think like it can be a grind for sure, but I think the people that we get to work with every day for me are what kind of make the difference. And like I said, being around soccer, like can never really complain about it. But the worst part of my job, I don't know. I'll have to get back to you on that one.
Okay. Your family's back on the East Coast. Is that a big thing for you?
Yeah, I think it's tough being far from home. I've kind of
Yeah,
like you heard, bounced around a little bit, so I'm kind of more used to it. Or I've gotten more used to it, I think. But definitely having family farther away from home is hard.
sure, sure. And you travel with the team,
They come to
and
all
you've
the East.
had, okay, I was going to say you go to the East Coast.
Yep,
They must
yep.
connect with them. That's cool.
I'm an only
All right,
child
now,
too, so
oh,
they
well,
come to
they
me a
must come
little
out
bit more.
here a
Yeah.
little bit. Yes. Have you taken them to the Winchester Mystery House yet?
No, I haven't, but some of our players went there this weekend and because I guess it's all done up
Yeah.
for Halloween. So,
Huge, huge. You should go. Or any Friday the 13th or full moon, you should get
okay.
some of your players or coworkers and head over there. Speaking of heading over, you're not that far from Santa Cruz, and you grew up in Rhode Island, which, believe it or not, has some amazing surf.
Yep.
Block Island and just along the coastline, obviously. I don't know if you grew up surfing. Have you been over to Santa Cruz? Have you come to my neck of the woods?
Yep. I was over there once. Once I got out here after being in Kansas City last year, I had to go to the beach and make sure like the beach is still the beach is still a thing. There's still an ocean out there. So definitely been out there. Love
Yeah,
it.
I've been combing the sand every day waiting your arrival. So I'm glad you enjoyed it. That's good. So if people want to kind of follow you, of course, I'm going to put the Bay FC website up there so it links. But do you do any social media? I mean, we connected through LinkedIn, but do you do Instagram? You're too young to do Facebook, so I don't know. What do you do? Do you tweeting? Are
Oh.
you on Threads, Snapchat? What are you doing?
I'm on Instagram. LinkedIn's probably the best way to get in touch with me. I haven't put anything on Instagram in months. I need to get better at kind of being active on there. But LinkedIn's probably the best way. Yep.
And then with Bay FC, do you accept internships or assistants? Any of the students at San Jose State or that may show interest in sports science, can they work with you? How does that go?
For right now, like I said, we tried to just keep it simple and didn't trying to get an internship program off the ground. We wanted to make sure if we were going to do something, it was going to be worthwhile for them and kind of for us.
Cool.
So not something that we had this year, just didn't have the structure for it, but it is something that we've kind of talked about starting in the future.
Right on. Well, this has been fun. I really appreciate it. I can't wait to get over next season or maybe even the postseason, depending on how you guys do in the upcoming matches here. You've got two more regular season matches and then the playoffs.
Just this weekend.
One.
Win and you're in.
Oh, wait, is it home or away?
Away. We're in Houston.
Going against the Dash. All right. Well, I hope you just blot them right out. That would be great. Gabby, this has been great. I can't thank you enough for coming on. I learn something every time. It's such a selfish podcast in that way for me. And I really appreciate you being my teacher for this time.
Oh, awesome. Thanks so much for having me.
You got it. And that's it for this episode. Man, it was a good conversation with Gabby. I want to thank Gaby Smith, of course, and Bay FC. Good luck in the playoffs, and we hope that you make it to the finals. In the meantime, remember, you can go to my website, rockysnyder.com, for information, continuing education workshops, whole bunch of videos, blogs, and a whole bunch more. But don't forget also setantacollege.com if you're looking to get a master's of science in athletic performance or coaching. Follow us on Instagram if you haven't done that yet, Rocky_Snyder. Click that subscribe button. Don't be waiting. Tell 2 friends because I want them on by next week. Have a great time.